Okay, so that was the 2021 All Virginia Band and Orchestra bass clarinet excerpt. And I'm now going to talk about some things that I think that you should focus on in the development of this piece. I'm James Tobin, obviously Charlottesville, Virginia, tobinclarinet.com. And there's a couple details here that are really important. Aside from just learning the notes and the rhythms and having those down and feeling like they're familiar and easy, which is a really important concept. Accents. So a lot of us learn accents in combination with tonguing, and because of that we think that the accents are a tongued thing, or that tonguing is most of what an accent is. And it's not at all. An accent is a burst of air that diminishes. It's literally a diminuendo symbol for a reason, okay? So I think that the composer has very specifically placed accents in some places and not in others. And so you might want to try practicing accents away from the music. You know, not every accent needs to be played the same way. You can have a lot of that. The shape of the accent can be an expressive choice in addition to the crescendos and diminuendos and all the other things that we were asked to do in the piece. So your core muscles must flex in some way to the air, all right? And this is completely separate from tonguing, all right? A great way, intuitive way to get in touch with it is cough. Like, that is absolutely a burst of air. It's a similar concept. So, places in which the composer has asked for accents and places where they haven't. So in the second measure, we have this theme, or this part of the initial melodic material. The first note here, the dotted eighth note, has an accent. The height of this phrase does not have an accent in this case. But if we go to measure 8, different situation. And so you want to show the judges that you can place the accents where they're asked for and not just sometimes where we would expect them to be. So in measure 2, I'm more concentrating on making sure I don't accent the highest note, the C on beat 3, because I want to show that I'm reading the music and preparing it the way the composer has asked. Another interesting place for accents and non-accents would be 11, 12, and 13, where we have a series of arrivals, a little sequence that's ascending, and the first, second, and fourth dotted eighth notes in this passage have accents. The third one does not. So be picky about your accents. There are 4 different types of articulation in this piece. There is regular notes, which I generally speaking tongue legato. Okay? There are staccato notes, which need to be short. And then there's this middle ground where they have the staccato and the legato, which is essentially a long staccato or a separated legato, whichever way appeals to you to think about it. And then there are some triplets that have tenuto lines on them, so as legato as you can play them. And you want to show that you can make the differences between those articulations apparent. So a couple things, again, you should try working on this away from the piece of music. So that in the first 2 measures here, the second note of the piece is staccato. Then we have the 2 eighth notes in beat 2 of measure 2 that are this long staccato or separated legato, however you want to think about it. And you want to make sure that those sound different, right? And I suggest that you, on top of exploring your articulation separate from the music, I think it's a really useful thing for you to do to play this with multiple articulations. What if everything was legato? What if everything was staccato? What if everything was the long staccato? And work to create great security in your articulation so that you have the differentiation you want. Okay? Dynamic levels. There are no pianos in this movement. None. This is just mezzo piano is the lowest thing we've got. But we clearly have sections that have stages. 11, 12, and 13 is a good example of that. Another wonderful example of that would be 20 and 22. And you want to be cognizant of making sure that you are taking us through the music and showing the judges that you have different dynamic levels. It's very useful for you if you know your scales and arpeggios to identify what's there. So clearly the piece of music starts in the key of E minor. The very first arpeggio we have is a B major chord, which would be a 5/7 chord in the key. Now, some of you may not be familiar with that yet. That's totally cool. But if you do know it, it makes it easier to play these passages. If you've worked on your arpeggios and you've worked on your scales, consciously identifying what's there will absolutely allow your brain to access all the muscle memory that you've built working on your scales and arpeggios. All right. Another example here would be the end of measure 4 into 5. This is an E minor arpeggio. This is a 1 chord in the key. All right. And so if you have knowledge and are familiar with arpeggios, you should identify them. Measure 10 is a D minor arpeggio. You will play it better for having identified it. All right. There are a couple of other little things here. There are many figures like measure 13, measure 19, measure 21 and 22, in which we are essentially accompanying ourselves, where you have, I'm going to play 21 and 22. And so every other note in that little passage is a C. Well, that's essentially like having someone play while another bass clarinet player plays. And it's good to recognize that the moving note in this figure is what's important, and the repeated note needs to be present, but it's not as important as the moving note. And if we just look a little more closely here in 21 and 22, we can see from the last triplet eighth note proceeding forward, we simply have a scale here, right? And it's a E harmonic minor, which is the key of the piece. So if you look for little details like that, it can make it easier for you to create the very clear, expressive line, and show that it's not just a technical hoop that you have to jump through, right? I mean, we do need to jump through it gracefully, but there's actually there's music behind what's going on there. I hope that these suggestions and tips are helpful to you. If you want some more, please leave a comment in the comments. I could absolutely show ways that you can pull these passages apart, but I think that the auditioners who are going to score the highest points are going to be able to play this confidently with ease, and they're going to have given great consideration to where the accents are, where they aren't, where the articulations are, and how to differentiate between them, and also making sure that we have different dynamic levels through the piece. And one last thing that just occurred to me. We have different types each year in this piece. We have different types of rallentandos. We have a poco rallentando earlier in the piece. We have a real ritardando in 13 and 14. And you want to make sure that you can show the judges that you understand that those are different. Okay. Good luck. I hope you prepare well, and I hope you have a great edition.